right, everybody. This is Tony Patino with here with Dixie Williford, our general manager for HVAC here in Houston. We're here to do our episode, our Trust Talks number on the importance of technician trust in the first 60 seconds of a home, right? How do you build trust there? So to go along with all of the other episodes we have are coming up around trust, I'm honored to have Dixie on board with us here today. And we've got some questions for her. She's got a very unique background, and I'd love for her to talk a little bit about as we go forward. So, Dixie, with that, just kind of high level, I know you've worn a few hats since you've been here, from the contact center to HVAC and all of the above. So, just high level for the group, kind of tell us what you're doing right now as a general manager in HVAC.
Thank you for your question. First off, I just want to say thanks for including me in this podcast. It's so exciting. So it's an honor to be a part of it and part of telling Abacus's story and telling that story with you. So thanks for the invite to Trust Talks. But to your question, GM of HVAC, run basically the sales, service, and install teams. So a lot of responsibility is, the making sure that I take it as a personal responsibility that everybody has a job to go to, a customer to serve, and when we serve that customer, we have installers that stay busy. So that's that journey that from the first, when I started here in the contact center and being that first impression and taking that call in and just deliver from that promise from the very get-go to the very end, whether it's just a simple fix, a simple maintenance call, or we're installing, the whole big gamut, a whole replacement of a system.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because you're not very many people in the field operations side have, an extensive contact center background, and so you're unique in that fact that you've ran a contact center and a very good sized contact center in that multiple locations here in Houston. But how did you build, just at a high level, you built your team there had to build trust over the phone, right? And now in your new role as leading a field operations team, kind of you're building trust inside of a home. So kind of, you can just talk a little bit about how you did that at, what the importance of it at the contact center level, and how you learned from there and transition that into what you do on the field side.
Yeah, great question. And usually you don't see somebody from a contact center coming into the operations side, and with my background more being operations. But I think what a customer wants to hear is a consistent message. And I think that's the best way to answer this question is it's about a consistent message. And that consistent message coming from the CSR when they answer the phone, it transfers to the dispatcher to confirm the lead. And then when the gentleman shows up at the door, or any of the technicians that show up at the door, it's anytime we break that consistent message, we're breaking the trust with the customer. And what is that consistent message? And I think I try to keep it as simple as possible when I'm talking to my technicians. I'm just trying to make sure that our message is clear, and is that we care. When we answer the phone with an enthusiastic hello, and that we're glad that they've called us rather than anybody else, right. And that the customer feels that right away. Like, whoa, this is different, and when they get that different feeling right away, they stay on the phone. They're already making that impression. They're being flooded with the emotion of, oh, I'm glad I called this company. And then when we perform that all the way downstream, it creates trust, because they say anytime you change a presentation anywhere along the line, it causes mistrust. And so the customer doesn't know what it is. They just know they don't like it. And so, but it does start from the very get-go, from the very hello that the customer gets on the phone.
So you mentioned consistency, and I'm writing down notes as you're talking as normal. So consistency is something I've sat in several of your meetings at the contact center level here at service and sales, and that's a message you consistently preach. It's consistency. How important is that when you're kind of taking this over to the technician side of it, the house? How important is consistency when it comes to their approach coming to the house for the first time?
It is a big part of it. Consistency is, if you're not consistent, you're just assassinating your, execution. If you're not consistent, you're just assassinating your execution. So, and what I mean by that is, like, there's a process. And you started off with talking, if you don't meander a bit, You started off talking about, how we show up, whether, we show up on the phone or how we show up at
Right.
the door. You can't decide which day, which part of you, because we all have different sides of us, which one is going to show up at this door.
Right.
And then we change it and show up at the next door. You have to be consistent in that approach. And when we're consistent in the approach, then if you're not doing something right, then we should be able to spot it right away, because you're doing it wrong every single time.
Mhm.
But in addition, if you're doing it right every single time, you'll get great results that come from it. So I talk about process, follow the process. But if you follow the process, it gives you time to focus on the customer, because you're not trying to figure out what to do next, because now it's become a part of muscle memory. And when we have muscle memory, that's because you're consistent. Now we can focus on the whole reason we're there. And the whole reason we're there is to serve the customer. That's all that ever matters.
Right. Is so yeah. That's a lot there, right? You talked a lot about just the consistent message, your approach when it comes to following a process, an established process, and I know you're big on process, and so I guess kind of taking it over to my next question is building trust at the front door is the main topic we're going to be talking about today, right? But what does that actually mean to you, right? Building trust at the front door, and why does that matter more in our industry than anything else,
Ooh,
or
good question.
anywhere else? Sorry.
Yeah, good question. Why does it matter more than anywhere else? Why does it matter in our trade more than anywhere else? I would say it doesn't. I would say it doesn't matter at our trade more. It matters no matter what trade you're in. We were at a little training session this morning, so I'm gonna pull this in real quick. We were talking about, trust. We spent like trust at the door, the first 60
Mhm.
seconds, all of January and half of February. Just 60 to 70 seconds. We did that for about a month and a half. And a lot of technicians and the selling technicians were like, what is the big deal? But when we role played, they were like, I see now. I'm not really showing up. And there's a phrase, I stole it from Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street guy. And he says, show up sharp as a tack, enthusiastic as heck, and an expert in your field. And that covers the first 3 seconds. And when you're not covering the first 3 seconds of, the first impression,
Mhm.
well, then customers already sizing you up. We all make first impressions. We're human. It's innate in us. It's our survival skill that we make. We're making impressions, but not only are customers doing it to us, we're doing it to customers. So when I say, it's not necessarily anytime you're showing up to a customer's home, no matter what field you're in. It is important that we are locked in on making a great first impression. Not when we get inside the home, not when we're doing an inspection, and not when we're sitting down at the table with them. That's where we start to turn on our charm and hope to make a connection.
So kind of just I know you spent a ton of time first part of the year, as you mentioned, really diving into this. So what are some other key points that you brought up with your team that you really felt like, hey, because it sounded like, hey, at first they were questioning, what are we doing here? And now, but at some point they heard you or they bought in, right? And so can you just talk a little bit about that and maybe how you're seeing that show up today, a few months later?
Absolutely. Great question. So it is important to make the first impression, and we talk about it, and everybody gets it. Like, okay, yeah, first impression. But what does that actually mean? So, what does it mean to show up at the door on time, dressed, ready to go? Ready. And it really comes down to one word, Tony. One word. And it's not first impression. It's not actually how we show up. The one word that the technicians really need to focus on, or what we learn to focus on, so that we can be great at delivering. We care to customers and delivering results is control. And then of that control, I break it down to 3 areas: self control, controlling the flow, and controlling the narrative. And that's what we focus on, is like, so what does it mean to show up at the door? Well, you have to establish control from the very get-go. Controlling, first off, is starting with self-control. Like, did you tuck in your shirt? Did you, you know, did you, maybe call and vent out your last lead with your manager?
Right.
Did you look through the notes so you know what you're coming into? Are you ready to show up sharp? Are you coming up to the door with everything? Yeah, that's self-control. Actually, throughout your whole presentation, you have to have self-control. We all have different aspects of us that we might want to give price too early, or
Right.
we might want to get annoyed that the kids are running around distracting. We have to establish good self-control. And that starts from the very get-go, right when we show up, and how we present ourselves. We have an actual script we call the guide,
Mhm.
because we're literally dancing with the customer. We're getting the customer to dance with us, just how we step in and we step out, and and watching the motions with them, so that we can start establishing control, from the get-go, and move it through our presentation in the home to make it a great experience for the customer. It's not about manipulation, or it's about making it a great experience so it feels like something different. We want it to feel something different for the customer.
Gotcha. So you've got an extensive background, right? You've been doing this for 20 plus years, right? More than 20 plus years in the home service space. And over that time, and you've seen a lot of technicians, you've seen a lot of different trends go, this and that. You just talk to me a little bit about how you ran your own home service company in Kansas City, right? And what did it feel like when a technician earned the customer's trust there? I mean, and what did it cost, and ultimately when? Let me see. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that question. I'm gonna cut on this one, Dixie. I was going to ask the question, but I'm going to ask it a little different than before. So
I don't know if
okay.
you can hear the weed whacker in the background or not.
Well, it's outside my window, so it kind of threw me off when I was.
Yeah, it's outside
I was
my window too.
so it kind of threw me off a little bit when I was looking at the question. I was going to ask you this. The good news is we can edit all this stuff out, so it's
Yeah.
all good. All right, so here, let's pivot to the question about you running your home service company in Kansas. So okay, so moving over to another question here, Dixie. So when you ran because you ran a very successful company in Kansas City, right? And you were the owner operator there of your own business there. What did it feel like when a technician earned the customer's trust? And what did it cost when they didn't?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's the same as it was then as it is now, gaining customers' trust. I think when I think of this question, I think of kind of in two parts. I think of it as the logistics side and the important side that establishing trust with the customer. I used to say this in Kansas City, and it's a little smaller market than Houston. So when I came here and started talking about these numbers real quick that I'll share with you, they did increase. But technicians, there's over 1,500 professionally licensed HVAC companies here in Houston, and I used to say it was like over 700 in Kansas City. So when you think about it, and then there's like over 7,000 technicians, and then estimated 1,000 comfort advisors. To when you have to show up different,
Mhm.
and you have to put something, your best foot forward. If you're not, the market's very noisy, and so to establish a relationship and bring them into your family and into your fold, and making that an emotional connection with customers is so important. And I was thinking about there's a customer that comes to mind, and it's one of my technicians that worked for us for a long time. He came back to me and was talking about building trust. He went and saw this customer. He was a World War veteran. He was in his 80 years old. They were literally needed a repair. It's the middle of the summer. Of course, it's hot in Kansas City. It gets 100 degrees plus there as well. And so Jason comes to me and he's like, "Hey, this customer is willing to give us their very last penny to make this few $1,000 repair." And he's like, we've already talked to the son. The son is a little preacher at a small little church. They don't really have the money either.
Mhm.
And so we all kind of thought for a second. It's like, can we really take this veteran, 80-plus-year-old gentleman, his last dollars? No, you can't do that. You can't do that. We just did the right thing, and we just replaced the system for him. We just went in, we replaced the whole system for him. And sometimes that's what we need to do for our community.
Mhm.
Is just doing the right thing, and not, instead of being right, taking the money and moving on. Is that customer going to be a customer for life? Of course.
Right.
However, we're talking 80-year-old man. We're just talking about taking care of your community. And I think if you take care of your community and show to your community that you care, then you don't have to convince people to come to you. They'll stick with you because they see that you care. And so kind of going back to that singular message, as far as how do you build trust? Well, you build trust by how you show up, how you deliver, how you execute, and then building that team around you.
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to do that for that customer if Jason hadn't come to me and said, "Hey, I really think this is the right thing to do. What do you think?" If he didn't trust me enough, if he had feared like I just need to, sell the guy $2,000 and move on, it was a great team. It takes a team to do this together and just do the right thing. I think that's a good example. It's not like we're giving, systems away.
Right.
We have to stay in business. We have to make money. But if you're willing to go out there and earn people's trust, and that takes hard work, it takes confidence in what you do. It's following a process and being consistent with it, putting your own pressures and your own problems aside to go step into the home and serve the customer. And not to be cliche, but that's what it's about. We
Right.
don't exist unless we have customers that want to come to us, no matter what size you are. I ran a successful business, but it was a smaller business, nothing like the size of Abacus. And so I think sometimes you can lose sight. And I see that with the comparison, regardless if you're a small business or a large business, it's all relative. So anyway, that's what comes to mind when you ask me that question.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. There's like the scale of the business, obviously, whether it's an abacus or a bigger organization, you still got to show up and you still have to execute on what we call the basics, the blocking and tackling. So none of that changes, right? You just happens a little more frequently the bigger you are, but you still do the next right thing. I know we talk about that a lot, is just doing the next right thing. And sometimes that is, hey, the next right thing for that particular customer was to take care of them in their situation. Doesn't make the cut, but you're making an investment in your customers. You're also, for Jason, that technician, it goes a long way with him. Hey, he did the right thing. He brought it to you, and you guys made the decision to take care of that gentleman. And he saw that as like, hey, this is a great company I'm working for. This is a place where they're not just out here for the next dollar, right? They're out here to really serve the community, and they really do care about their customers. So that's
Yeah, we didn't get TV time for that. We just did the right thing, We just, it felt good walking away. And we hope that he lets other folks know what we did for them, of course, but we weren't looking for the publicity of it. Yeah, that's how you earn. You got to go out there and earn the trust with your customer, and the trust with your community. And remember, the showing that we care.
fantastic. Okay, so moving over to another question real quick. And so in the first 60 seconds of a technician's interaction with a customer, what's happening most people don't pay enough attention to?
Yeah, and it's a good question, and I kind of addressed this already, so I'll
Yeah.
swing back to it. I think that, and this is what a lot of our service technicians figured out, was that, I talk about, oh, let's show up sharp as a tack, enthusiastic as heck, and an expert in their field, and they're like, yeah, okay. But when we went through some role plays, I had several technicians that they'd show up at the door, they'd knock, they have their head down, and they're like, hi, Mrs. Jones. I know it's first thing in the morning. I know it's 8 a.m. I'm trying to get going for you,
Right.
and they're telling this in the role play. And I'm like, oh my goodness,
Right.
oh my goodness, and the thing is that they just didn't realize how important that first 60 seconds is, right? By that kind of example. And what I mean by that, going back to that singular message, is the singular message that we care, but caring through control. I think what most people don't realize is showing up in the first 60 seconds is that you can establish control with the customer so that they can know, okay, this feels different. This is a different experience, instead of them running away or them pointing, oh, my thermostat's over there, or the attic door's over there,
Right.
and then they run away. We're doing things in order to capture them so that we can have a dialogue. Like, if you don't get to know the customer, how can you help them? How can you deliver upon expectations if you don't know what pains they have in their home? So, and you can start establishing that in the first 60 seconds. But just by how we show up, how we ask for their name, something as simple as that. So, showing up again with self-control, knowing your script per se, and then control it, because we want to make sure that we control the flow of it, and then making sure that you're coming back and more importantly, just make sure that the customer's enjoying the process. I have two keystones that I lean on to a lot. I know you've heard this, and that comes to mind as well. But you show up to the home first off with gratitude. And sometimes we have to just remind ourselves of gratitude. And a lot of these technicians, they might be young in their field, they're just learning, or communications not maybe the best thing that they have, and we have to work on that. And my 19-year-old son was just reminding me this weekend about how anxiety and gratitude, in the brain physiologically cannot live in the same space.
They can't coexist.
They can't coexist.
Right.
And so, when you show up at the door, showing up with gratitude, thankful that you have this opportunity to serve a customer, no matter what the door looks like, no matter who shows up and opens up the door. Because again, they're making impressions about you and we're making impressions about them. So being grateful for everyone. And then as we come in, we start asking lots of questions. We want to stay curious. We want to stay curious with the customer. And when we stay curious and ask questions and we're full with gratitude, then in that first 60 to 90 seconds, we get the opportunity to start easing the customer's anxiety, easing our own anxiety, and getting them to tell us about, themselves, telling us about things that are happening in their home. And so now when I'm going to look for solutions later, I can say, hey, I did this because XYZ, what you told me in the beginning of the call. That is controlling the situation and making sure you're doing it consistently.
No, that's a fantastic point, because one of our theme this year is ready, set, grow. And, the first, belief is in there. And our second principle is gratitude. And I'm a big believer that, it's not the situation you're in. It's not everybody. We're all going to be challenged with different ups and downs and ebbs and flows of the day, of the week. But it's living in where you're at and being grateful for the opportunities you have. Because as you said earlier, you can, anxiety and gratitude can't coexist in the same room, right? They just can't. And so a lot of times it's easy as a technician or someone that's in the field. The job can get kind of mundane sometimes. It can get routine. You gotta, oh, here I go again. I'm on another one of these XYZ calls, or whatever that may be. Instead of looking at it with gratitude, and your perspective changes. Now you've opened up things, and how you approach that customer's home turns into something completely different, right? I mean, that's what I heard from in how you explain this, and how I've seen it happen in with other technicians, right? So very, very, very great, good, interesting point there.
And what I love, you talked about Kansas City and my experience here, and I want to kind of add on a little bit about, because not only are the technicians are growing, in what they're learning and what they're doing and the experience with the customer. But I'll tell you, I've grown so much, in the time that I've been here, even though being in the field. I heard something recently, and you were talking, and it came to my mind, and I love the little phrase, because if we're not always growing, right, growing on the vine per se, if you're not looking to get better, no matter how old you are, no matter what experiences you think that you've been there and done that, if you're not always growing and you feel like you're at a time where you're ripe, once you're ripe, you're dying, So that's where I was like, it's so true. I'm constantly growing and learning my profession and trying to sharpen my skills, and constantly, doing what I can to deliver for the technicians and have a resource for them so that they can continue to grow and get more confident, not just technically in their field, but professionally, with delivering. Because 50% of what we do in the home, if not more, is the interaction with the customer. And it's probably the least taught skill that we provide to our technicians. We're all about what we need to do technically in the home. And so we do a lot of that. We still need to do that. We need to make sure we show up, and we don't want to have recalls. We want to make sure that we do what the expectations are of the customer, but to develop trust so the customer comes back to us. Because again, we've got competition. We want the customer to come back to us. We spend a lot of time in our department on how to talk to a customer, just the soft skills part of it, so that it feels different, and customers are like, that's why I keep calling advocate.
Thank you. I love the answer. I love the question, or just the responses to all the questions so far. I've got one last question to kind of bring up with you, and we can go as long as we need to go on this one. So with everything you've learned and in your career, you've done a lot, right? And again, I think you're content, as you said, or you're continuing to pour into yourself. You're continuing to grow. But with everything you've learned, what do you know? What do you know about trust now that you wish someone had told you early on in your career?
What do I know of trust? What should I have done? I think that We had a conversation a little bit about this several months ago that comes to mind. And I think that it comes down to, I'm going to go off
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
moment. Okay.
Okay.
But this is where my brain goes. I love little stories and studies and things of that sort because that's just kind of how I think. But there's a study done on being lucky, and I've been talking to technicians about this recently. That's why it's top mind of awareness. And I know you're like, lucky, trust, what the heck? Where's she going with this? Well, now you know when you're sitting in meetings with Dixie, this is what the technicians go. Where's she going with this? But there's a study done on feeling lucky and the people who felt lucky versus the people who felt unlucky. And so when they asked people if they, which one they felt like they were, they did a study. It was a newspaper study, so to tell you how old it is. And the people who said, I feel lucky, they would open up the page and they would ask them to count the pictures that they had in the newspaper. And actually on page 2, it said there's 43 pictures. Do not look, you don't need to go any further. So, and then even they had a bonus page, several pages down. There's only 15 more pictures. You can stop now. And so the unlucky people didn't see it and they counted all the pictures. The lucky people saw it. So what does that say? It's the same thing with trust. Trust is something that is earned just like luck is. If you feel lucky, you tell yourself you're lucky, you're going to get out there and get opportunities for you.
Right.
You're going to earn people's trust. And this is kind of analogy I've been talking with the guys a little bit lately is trying to get them outside of their norm for just a moment to think about what is trust instead of the normal conversation, and get out of the normal conversation for a moment and think about it in a little bit different way. And so then now they come up to me and go, I'm feeling lucky. And so it means something different. We're talking about trust.
Right.
But they're coming up saying, I feel lucky. I feel lucky. But we've made the analogy that trust is earned because we're looking for it. We feel like we're in trust with the customer because if we feel lucky, opportunities will come to us. And I was just going back to that story we talked about several months ago about, opportunities have come for me, and I'm not necessarily looking into it. I wasn't looking to own a business for 20 years. I wasn't even looking to be in the trades necessarily. Just
Right.
the opportunity came and I went with it. I saw it. I saw the 43 pictures on the page 2 and I stopped and moved forward to the next thing.
Right.
Instead of, staying, not looking for the details, right? So it's fun. I try to take life seriously.
Mm-hmm.
However, I try to find the blooms in it and have fun while I'm doing it,
Right.
because, we got to still make money. At the end of the day, we have to generate revenue.
Right.
But you got to remember the purpose. You got to remember the reason that you're here. And for me, my customer is my technicians. So I'm here to help serve them. And when I do that at the highest performance that I can, then it gets replicated. They
Right.
go then serve the customer, and they then give them the wow experience. They develop the trust so the customer wants to come back to us because, like I said, we've got 15, 100 customers out there, or excuse me, other competitors out
Yeah.
there.
And that's 1,500 legal competitors. There's thousands more that are doing this kind of and absolutely, absolutely. Well, great. It's been an honor to talk with you. It's been a lot of fun, regarding trust and the importance of first impressions and how trust is earned over the phone, how trust is earned in the first 60 seconds as a technician. But I also I think what I heard a lot more was about, hey, these are some of the consistency, caring, the mindset, gratitude, all of these key things. And they're not just words. They really are. They can be words on a wall, or they can be words on a poster board, but it's how do you take that and how you apply it to what you're doing, whether you're a call center rep, a dispatcher, working in our warehouse, working in our field, working in our office. Everybody's going through different stages and different trials and tribulations at work or at home. So I think it is the mindset, and it is about, you could take today's podcast and around how we're building trust and apply it to anything that you're doing. And I think you'll have success with it. So again, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for carving out some, I know you're super busy. We're getting warm out there. So the guys are probably knocking at your door to chat with you right now, but thank you so much. And I really appreciate it.